Crowned eagle. The Taung child was discovered in 1924 in South Africa by anatomist Raymond Dart. It was a small skull, belonging to an Australopithecus africanus roughly 3 years old at the time of death, and it became one of the most studied fossils in paleoanthropology. For decades, researchers focused on what the skull revealed about early human evolution. Then in 1995, researchers Lee Berger and Ron Clark looked at it differently. They weren't studying the brain cavity or the teeth. They were studying the damage. Around the eye sockets of the Taung child were specific puncture marks and scratches, shallow, precise, and patterned in a way that didn't match any known carnivore. The marks matched the talons of a large bird of prey, specifically the crowned eagle. The crowned eagle is still alive today. It lives across sub-Saharan Africa, and it is, by most measures, the most powerful eagle on Earth relative to its size. It doesn't hunt by speed. It hunts by ambush, dropping silently from a high perch, striking the back of the skull with its talons, and driving them through the bone before the prey registers what is happening. Modern crowned eagles regularly take prey several times their own body weight. Monkeys, small antelope, monitor lizards, and when researchers examined the feeding behavior of modern crowned eagles, they found something that recontextualized the Taung child entirely. Modern crowned eagles cache their kills in trees. They carry the prey up into the canopy, away from ground scavengers, and feed from there. The Taung child's skull showed no signs of gnawing from ground predators. It showed signs of having been carried. What Raymond Dart discovered in 1924 wasn't just an ancient hominid. It was something's lunch. The implications reach further than one fossil. Early Australopithecus lived in open woodland environments across eastern and southern Africa, exactly the territory where large birds of prey have the greatest advantage. They were small, they moved in groups but not always in tight formation, and their young were slow and vulnerable for years after birth. For a crowned eagle, an early hominid infant in an open clearing was not a challenge. It was an opportunity. Dinofelis. Dinofelis is the predator that paleoanthropologists argue about most, not because the evidence is weak, but because it is uncomfortably specific. Dinofelis was a large felid, roughly the size of a modern leopard, but more heavily built, with semi-saber teeth, not the full elongated canines of smilodon, but long enough to be highly effective against soft tissue. It lived across Africa, Europe, and Asia between 5 million and 1 million years ago, overlapping almost perfectly with the timeline of early hominid development. What makes Dinofelis different from other large predators of the same period is where its fossil remains keep appearing. Again and again, excavation sites containing Dinofelis bones also contain hominid bones. At Swartkrans Cave in South Africa, one of the most significant early human fossil sites on the continent, the remains of Dinofelis and Paranthropus and early Homo are found in the same sediment layers. C.K. Brain, who spent decades excavating Swartkrans, proposed something that made the field deeply uncomfortable. Dinofelis may not have hunted hominids incidentally. It may have specialized in them. The argument is built on repeated co-occurrence, on the specific size and build of Dinofelis matching a predator optimized for prey in the hominid size range, and on the absence of evidence suggesting it targeted the larger megafauna that most contemporary predators pursued. If Brain's interpretation is correct, Dinofelis wasn't an animal that occasionally took a hominid when the opportunity arose. It was an animal that came back, repeatedly, to the same sites, because that was where its preferred prey lived. Early humans didn't just share a landscape with Dinofelis. For hundreds of thousands of years, they may have been its primary target. Cave bear. The cave bear, Ursus spelaeus, stood over 11 feet tall on its hind legs and weighed up to 1,500 pounds. It lived across Europe and Western Asia from roughly 300,000 years ago until its extinction approximately 24,000 years ago. That extinction timeline overlaps almost exactly with the period when modern humans arrived in Europe in significant numbers, a fact that is still debated but not easily dismissed. What makes the cave bear directly relevant to early human survival is geography. Cave bears didn't just occasionally wander into caves, they depended on them. Caves were where they hibernated, where they raised young, and where they died in large numbers during winters when they didn't accumulate enough fat. In some cave systems, the bone deposits from cave bears run meters deep. At Drachenhöhle Cave in Austria, the remains of over 30,000 individual cave bears have been recovered from a single site. These were also the caves that Neanderthals and early modern humans needed. For shelter from Ice Age winters, for protection from ground predators, for sites to store food and maintain fire, caves were not optional. They were survival infrastructure, which meant that occupying a cave required either waiting for the cave bear to leave, fighting it for the space, or finding one it hadn't claimed. Scratch marks on cave walls at multiple European sites show the claw height of cave bears alongside Neanderthal tool marks. They were using the same walls, sometimes at the same time. A cave bear that woke unexpectedly from hibernation, or returned to find its den occupied, was not a manageable threat with stone tools and fire. It was 1,500 pounds of disoriented aggression in an enclosed space with no exit. Early humans didn't just fear the dark outside the cave. Sometimes the danger was already inside it. Smilodon. Smilodon fatalis is the most recognizable prehistoric predator after the non-avian dinosaurs, and familiarity has made it easy to underestimate. It was not simply a large cat with long teeth. It was a fundamentally different hunting machine. Its forelimbs were extraordinarily powerful, built not for chasing but for wrestling, for taking prey to the ground and holding it. Its canines, which reached up to 11 inches in some specimens, were not used for biting through bone. They were precision instruments, designed to penetrate soft tissue in a single controlled thrust, targeting the throat or the base of the skull. Smilodon lived across North and South America from roughly 2.5 million years ago till approximately 10,000 years ago. The La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles have yielded over 2,000 individual Smilodon specimens, making it one of the best documented large predators in the fossil record. And the timing of its extinction aligns closely with the arrival of humans in the Americas. Early humans migrating into the Americas from around 15,000 years ago walked into a continent where Smilodon was an established apex predator with no prior experience of human hunting behavior. It had no instilled fear of upright bipeds with projectile weapons. To Smilodon, a small group of humans moving across open grassland was not a threat. The humans in turn were entering territory where the predator had perfected its technique over millions of years. For however long that overlap lasted, it was not a balanced encounter. Nile crocodile. The Nile crocodile has been hunting at the water's edge for over 200 million years, and it has not changed significantly in that time because it has not needed to. It is the only predator on this list still alive today, and it still kills more humans annually than any other large animal in Africa. That continuity is the point. What makes the Nile crocodile relevant to prehistoric human predation is not that it occasionally took a hominid who wandered too close. It is that early hominids could not avoid water. Early humans and their predecessors settled along rivers, lakes, and wetlands across Africa because that was where food, plants, and hydration existed. The Nile crocodile was already there, had always been there, and was perfectly adapted to exploit exactly the behavior that made waterside living necessary. The repeated, predictable approach to the water's edge. Every hominid that knelt to drink, every group that crossed a shallow ford, every child left near the bank, was operating inside the crocodile's kill zone. Fossil sites along ancient lake margins in the East African Rift Valley have recovered hominid bones with crocodile bite marks. Not isolated incidents, a consistent documented pattern across multiple sites and multiple time periods. For early humans, the water that kept them alive was the same water that could kill them, and the thing waiting in it had been doing this longer than our entire genus had existed. Giant hyena, Pachycrocuta brevirostris, was the largest hyena that ever lived. It stood roughly 3 feet at the shoulder and weighed up to 440 pounds, nearly 3 times the size of a modern spotted hyena. It lived across Africa, Europe, and Asia from around 3 million years ago until approximately 500,000 years ago, and unlike its modern relatives, which are primarily active hunters as much as scavengers, Pachycrocuta appears from its bone structure to have been built almost entirely for one thing: consuming what other predators left behind. That specialization made it uniquely dangerous to early humans. Pachycrocuta's jaws were among the most powerful of any land mammal in its size class, capable of crushing the femur of a hippopotamus to access the marrow inside. It was drawn to the same kill sites, the same bone accumulations, the same resource concentrations that early hominids depended on, and it was not small enough to ignore or large enough to easily avoid. At multiple fossil sites across Africa and Eurasia, hominid bones show the characteristic scoring and crushing damage of large hyena jaws. Some of these bones were clearly scavenged after death. Others show patterns that suggest active predation. The distinction is difficult to prove from bone damage alone, but the presence of Pachycrocuta at hominid sites is not occasional. It is consistent enough that some researchers have proposed it as a major selective pressure on early human behavior, one of the reasons early humans began sleeping in elevated positions, guarding fire through the night, and developing coordinated group defense. The animal that may have taught early humans to stay alert in the dark was not a legendary monster. It was a hyena the size of a lion, drawn to the smell of whatever your ancestors had just managed to kill. For most of human prehistory, survival was not about conquering nature, it was about lasting another night inside it. The crowned eagle came from above. Dinophelus came back to the same camps, again and again. The cave bear was already inside the shelter. Smilodon had never learned to fear a human. The Nile crocodile had been waiting at the water's edge for 200 million years. and Pachycrocuta followed the smell of blood to wherever early humans had gathered around to kill. Every instinct modern humans carry, the fear of the dark, the discomfort of open spaces, the impulse to sleep in elevated or enclosed places, the deep unease near still water, was written into human behavior by these animals, not as myth, as memory. The kind that doesn't require language to pass from one generation to the next because it is pressed directly into the nervous system by survival. Your ancestors didn't just live alongside these predators, they were shaped by them. Every human alive today is descended from the ones who were afraid enough, alert enough, and coordinated enough to survive. The ones who weren't didn't leave descendants. That fear kept your bloodline alive.